I'm Daniel, 34, and I've always been the responsible one in the family. Not the favorite, not the golden child, just the one who picked up the slack, made things work, and quietly paid the bills no one else wanted to talk about. My younger brother, Matt, is the opposite. Charismatic, spontaneous, reckless in that charming way that people somehow reward. He could crash a car and get offered a new one the next day, while I'd be told to be more supportive. And for the most part, I accepted that. I stayed in the background, helped when I was asked, and swallowed the unfairness like a bitter pill. But nothing prepared me for what happened the night of his engagement dinner. It was a warm Friday evening. I showed up to the restaurant a little early, gift in hand, nothing over the top, but thoughtful, a custom engraved decanter set, with their initials and engagement date. I'd also arranged a small surprise at the end of the night, champagne on me, a gesture I knew would go unmentioned but might earn me a nod from my mother, the family's self-declared social glue. I wore my nicest suit, smiled through the awkward family banter, and even volunteered to make a toast, short and sweet. To Matt and Leah, may your future be just as bright and loud as your group texts. Everyone laughed. Even Leah gave me a polite smile. But then, somewhere between the second course and dessert, the room changed. Leah, Matt's fiancée, had always been frosty. Not openly rude, just dismissive. Polite in a way that made you feel small. She came from old money and made sure you never forgot it. The type of woman who'd say, "Oh, I thought that car was discontinued," if you mentioned your vehicle. But that night, with drinks flowing and the attention squarely on her, she let her mask slip. "So," she said, turning to me with that tight-lipped smile, "Matt told me your mom basically begged him to invite you. Said she didn't want the photos to look too broken family." She laughed, gently, as if it were a charming anecdote. My fork paused midair. I blinked. "Excuse me." "Oh, don't take it personally," she added with a little wave. "She just didn't want to deal with any drama. You know how she is." I glanced at Matt, expecting something. A shake of the head, a quiet, "That's not what I said." But he just stared down at his plate, fiddling with his steak. Then he chuckled. Not loudly, but enough. Enough for my stomach to sink. Across the table, my dad smirked and muttered, "Well, you know how dramatic you can get." I wasn't sure what stung more, Leah's dig, my father's dismissal, or Matt's silence. It all washed over me in this strange, quiet wave. I wasn't angry yet. Just cold. Numb. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout. I just folded my napkin, stood up slowly, and said, "I think I've had enough for one night." Someone said my name. I don't know who. I walked out of the restaurant and into the night like it was any other evening. But my heart was racing. In the car, I sat there for a long time, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed once. A text from my mom. "You could have stayed a little longer for your brother. Don't ruin this." Ruin what? A night where I was clearly an afterthought? A footnote in their perfect little photo album? I should have been used to it. For years, I let this kind of thing roll off me. I showed up to everything I was asked to. Paid for things no one remembered. I co-signed the loan for Matt's first condo when he was 24 and had no credit. I helped Dad get out of a tax mess he still pretends didn't happen. I even paid for Mom's dental work last spring when her insurance accidentally lapsed. None of it was seen. None of it was appreciated. But that night, that comment, that was the turning point. Because what they didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that I had been preparing a six-figure transfer for Matt. It was a surprise. Not a gift, exactly. A deal. I had quietly bought a small investment property a year ago. The plan was to sell it this quarter and transfer the funds to help Matt with the down payment for his dream home. He didn't know. No one did. I was going to tell him at the dinner. I canceled it the next morning, pulled the plug, reallocated the funds. And while I was at it, I went through every account, every payment, every little favor I'd been offering out of obligation. The gym membership my dad had accidentally linked to my card. The monthly transfers to my mom labeled miscellaneous errands. Even the Spotify family plan that included all four of them. Gone. All of it. I didn't send a message. I didn't answer any calls. I just started to disappear, piece by piece, from their lives. They still don't know what else I took with me when I left that table. Not yet. Because you see, I also had access to something else, something they really counted on. And the moment I walked out of that dinner, I decided I was done being the silent support beam they leaned on while mocking the foundation beneath their feet. Let's just say, the fallout is coming. And it's going to be loud. The silence after that dinner was almost eerie. No texts. No calls. Not even the passive-aggressive group chats that usually lit up with birthday reminders, photo dumps, or family news that somehow never involved me. At first, I thought they'd caught on, that maybe my quiet exit had made them pause. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. 3 days later, I got the first message. It was from Matt. "Hey bro, just following up on that thing you mentioned a few months ago, the house fund? We're starting to look at listings this weekend. Let me know what you need from me." I stared at the screen for a long time. The casual entitlement in his tone. No, thanks for showing up. No acknowledgement of what had happened at dinner. Just picking up right where he left off, assuming I'd still play the part of the quiet, dependable wallet. I didn't reply. A day later, I got an email from my dad. Subject: utility overcharge. Daniel, the electric bill seems way higher than usual this month. Can you check on that? Might be a mistake with the auto pay. I almost laughed. There was no mistake. I had disconnected every auto pay from my accounts. I didn't even bother responding. I knew it would take them a week or two to realize just how many things were propped up by me. By the end of that week, the phone call started. First Mom, twice in one morning. Then Dad. Then Matt again. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Because while they were starting to feel the inconvenience of my absence, I was setting something else in motion. Let me explain. I work in finance. Nothing flashy, mostly real estate and capital advising for mid-sized investors. But I'm smart with money. Smart enough to know how to move things quietly. About 6 years ago, Matt had come to me with a business opportunity. A wellness app startup with his friend, who had zero tech experience and was already $30,000 in credit card debt. Matt had no business plan, no pitch deck, just big eyes and bigger dreams. I told him no at first, but my mom called me that night crying. "He just wants to prove himself for once, Daniel. Be the big shot. Can't you help him?" So I did. I put up $80,000. Told him it was a loan, structured formally, with a timeline and exit clause. He signed the papers, smiling, not understanding a word of it. The app failed in 18 months. They all assumed I'd written it off. What they didn't realize was that Matt had signed over partial ownership of the online branding and digital assets as part of the repayment clause. And despite the failure, those assets had value: domain names, affiliate structures, subscriber lists. I'd quietly flipped them last year to a buyer for nearly $140,000. I hadn't told a soul. And now, that money was parked somewhere very useful, under a trust. A trust they couldn't touch. A trust they thought was going toward family investment. In fact, my mom had just asked me last month if that inheritance safety net was still being handled. I'd smiled and said, "Yep, everything's in place." What she didn't know was that I'd recently changed the beneficiaries. None of them were on it anymore. I also remembered something else, something more delicate. Matt and Leah had filed their engagement party budget through an account tied to my financial firm's client services arm. I'd offered to help them manage it so they could maximize rewards points and track expenses. It was a gesture of goodwill at the time. That account, still under review. Because Leah, in her confidence, had made a few luxury purchases assuming I wouldn't look too closely. Dresses, spa retreats, a first-class flight she claimed was for venue scouting. She breached the budget terms and marked several items as business expenses. A few discreet conversations with my firm's audit department, and let's just say that's now a flagged account. Their shared credit line was suspended pending investigation. Meanwhile, the texts were escalating. "Daniel, this isn't funny. We need to talk. Did you cancel Mom's insurance auto pay? She just got a notice. You're being immature. You always do this, make everything about you." But they still didn't understand. This wasn't about one dinner. This wasn't about a snide comment from Leah or a chuckle from my dad. This was about decades. Decades of showing up, giving more than I had, sacrificing weekends, vacations, peace of mind, so they could mock me at the table I helped set. And it wasn't just money. It was emotional labor. Sitting through family meetings where I was the mediator, cleaning up Matt's messes, offering to just help out when Mom needed someone to handle Dad's tax issues, being the one who quietly Venmo'd my sister when she didn't want to ask Dad for help with rent. They thought silence meant compliance. That quiet meant weak. That being dependable meant I was disposable. So I stopped being all of those things. And that's when the real fallout began. The group chat lit up, finally. Mom's panicked messages. Dad's passive-aggressive voice notes. Matt's ranting paragraphs about family betrayal. Leah even chimed in once, saying, "It's sad when bitterness poisons your ability to celebrate others." I almost replied, "Almost." But instead, I sent one message. Just one. You don't get to insult the foundation and then cry when the house crumbles. Then I muted the thread. That same day, I got a message from my aunt, someone I barely spoke to. It read, "Whatever's going on, I just want you to know I see you. And I'm proud of you." It nearly broke me. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because there was still one more thing I'd taken with me when I walked out of that dinner. And they hadn't noticed yet. And when they finally realize it, it's going to change everything. They didn't notice at first, of course they didn't. Because to notice would require paying attention, and no one in my family had ever made a habit of that. But slowly, piece by piece, the cracks began to show. And soon, they'd realize that the most valuable thing I'd taken wasn't money. It wasn't the trust account. It wasn't the real estate documents or the credit line oversight. It was the family business. Or at least, the part of it they didn't know I owned. Back when my grandfather passed, he left behind a small chain of storage facilities. Nothing glamorous, but steady money. Reliable tenants, low overhead. My dad took over managing them, and as far as the family was concerned, he ran the show. But he wasn't a businessman, he was a figurehead. And when he got in over his head a few years ago, I was the one he came to. Quietly. Desperately. He'd nearly lost one of the properties after failing to pay the property taxes for 2 consecutive years. The county was about to seize it. He begged me for help, swore it was a one-time mistake, that he'd fix it. I agreed to cover the liens, but on one condition: he signed over a controlling stake in that branch to my name. He didn't even blink. He was so panicked he'd have signed away the title to his house. And so, without realizing the long-term consequences, he handed me control of the only part of the business that actually turned a consistent profit. Over time, I made improvements. Updated the software. Cut waste. Reworked the lease agreements. I took that one branch and made it flourish. Then I bought out a second one, this time legally, through a shell LLC. No one knew it was me. Not even him. I wanted it that way. Now, 3 of the 5 branches operate under my name. Quietly. Legally. With documentation they'd never bother to read because they always assumed they were smarter, more entitled, more central. And the only reason they hadn't noticed yet? I kept sending the quarterly reports to my dad's old business email, doctored to make it look like everything was status quo. He never checked the real books anyway. He just looked at the total income and assumed it was all his. But this quarter, I didn't send the fake reports. This quarter, I let reality hit. It started with a phone call to the property manager I'd hired, someone professional, discreet, and loyal because I pay well and treat people like human beings. I asked her to update the signage on the properties. Just a subtle change, removing the old family crest logo and replacing it with the new branding I'd been working on in the background. She texted me a picture when it was done. Black and white lettering. Clean. Modern. Simple. Daniel & Co. Storage Solutions. Secure your future with people who show up. The next call came from Matt, but it wasn't to me. It was to the property manager. Why did the signage change? Where's the old logo? My dad owns this place. Who approved this? She told him calmly, professionally, that any inquiries would need to go through the legal owner. And then she gave him my name. I can only imagine his face. That was the moment the storm broke. My phone rang for the next 6 hours straight. First it was Dad, demanding to know what I'd done. Calling it fraud, despite having signed every page himself. Threatening to call lawyers he couldn't afford. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom, crying. Accusing me of tearing the family apart. Telling me I was being cruel, vindictive, ungrateful. I stared at her message for a long time, that word, ungrateful, echoing in my skull. As if decades of thankless giving hadn't bought me even the right to walk away. Matt called next. 8 missed calls in a row. Then he finally left a voice message. I can't believe you do this. I don't even care about the money. Man, this was about family. About legacy. You just stole it because you're bitter. That's all you've ever been, jealous and bitter. Jealous? I nearly laughed. Not because he was wrong, no, he was exactly wrong. I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted. Tired of showing up and being told I was never really one of them. Tired of the smiles that curled into sneers behind closed doors. Tired of my presence being tolerated only because it was useful. So I took back what was mine. Not out of spite, but because I deserved better than to live as a footnote in my own family's history. The next day, I got an email. From Leah. Short. Cold. Predictable. Daniel, whatever your issues are, they shouldn't affect Matt's future. Be the bigger person. You've made your point. Now fix it before the wedding becomes a disaster. I stared at it for a while, heart calm, hand steady. Fix it? No. Leah. This wasn't something I was fixing. This was the part where everything they'd broken finally started to fall apart in their hands. And I hadn't even dropped the final shoe yet, because there was still one more thing they were about to lose. And this one would hit hardest of all. I waited a week, not because I was unsure of what to do next, but because I wanted the silence to sink in. I wanted them to sit in the wreckage of their own entitlement. I wanted the dust to settle just enough so when the final blow came, they'd have nowhere to hide from it. And when it came, it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be cruel. It would be quiet, precise, permanent. The final piece? The family trust. My grandfather was a planner, a military man turned small-town businessman. He believed in structure, order, and the idea that legacy meant something. When he passed, he left behind a modest but well-maintained trust. Its contents weren't massive: some land, a few investment accounts, and a stake in the storage business that was passed through the generations. But it was enough to give our family a comfortable cushion for decades. Enough to fund college tuitions, weddings, down payments. Enough to keep Matt in shiny new cars and let Mom live like a retired senator. What most of them never knew was that in the final years of my grandfather's life, I was the one who handled all of his paperwork. Not out of ambition, just duty. I visited him twice a week at the care home, read to him, helped him organize prescriptions, filled out forms, kept his lawyer updated on medical and financial decisions. I was there when no one else showed up. So one day, about 6 months before he passed away, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. They'll circle like vultures the moment I go. Just make sure the one person who showed up doesn't get left with the bones. I didn't understand what he meant then. But now? It couldn't be clearer. When he updated the trust, he named me as successor trustee. Quietly. Without ceremony. No one noticed. And I didn't correct them. They all assumed my dad was in charge. And that was fine. I never touched it. Never interfered. Not even when Matt requested an early withdrawal for a short-lived crypto adventure. Not even when Mom suggested we temporarily divert the education funds to pay off some medical bills she racked up from a boutique cosmetic clinic in Arizona. I played dumb. I let them believe Dad held the pen. But when I revoked all the authorizations that week, when I officially closed the old trust account and restructured the assets under a new portfolio, they noticed. Fast. The first call came from the lawyer Dad had used since I was in high school. I knew him well. His name's Rick, and he's a quiet man who doesn't like drama. Daniel, he said over the phone, his voice tight, your father is under the impression that I've frozen his access to the trust. I replied, calm as ever, that's because I have. You're the legal trustee now? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, I've always been. He paused. You're aware this is going to cause some upset. I'm counting on it, I said. He exhaled. I figured. The fallout came the next day. Dad showed up at my office unannounced. He pushed past the receptionist, red-faced, already shouting. You think you can just steal from your own family? From your brother? From your mother? I didn't get up. I didn't even flinch. No, I said. I think I finally stopped giving to people who never said thank you. You're bitter. No, I repeated. I'm tired. There's a difference. And I've decided I'd rather be the villain in your story than the doormat in mine. He slammed his hands on my desk. You're going to ruin everything. You don't get to rewrite our family. I'm not rewriting anything, I said, standing now, voice low but unwavering. I'm just stepping out of the version where I exist to serve you. He stared at me. I saw it then, not anger, but fear. Not because he'd lost the money, but because he finally realized he'd never really understood me. When he left, I sat back down and stared at the documents on my desk. The new trust structure was airtight. The land that hadn't been developed yet? Already under offer to a buyer I vetted myself. The residuals from the business branches I controlled? Folded neatly into a fund set aside for someone they'd never expect. My niece. Matt's daughter. 6 years old. Sweetest kid I've ever met. She once sat next to me at Thanksgiving and asked if I liked being the helper in the family. I'd laughed, not really knowing how to answer her. But later that night, she slipped a drawing into my coat pocket, a picture of me wearing a superhero cape, standing next to a treasure chest labeled Mr. Daniel's Secret Gold. I didn't cry then, but I did later when I found it again. I'd seen enough to know that little girl didn't stand a chance in a household where validation came with conditions and love was transactional. So I made her the beneficiary. Full access when she turns 25. With one condition: no one in her immediate family gets a cent unless she decides to share it herself. The rest? It's going to charity. Educational scholarships for first-gen college students. Grants for kids who grow up being told they don't belong. Endowments for quiet people, the overlooked, the underestimated, the ones who keep showing up even when no one claps. The next week, I got the last call I'd ever take from my mother. Her voice was soft. Too soft. "Danny," she said. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. "You're hurting people who love you." I breathed in. "No, Mom. I'm hurting people who used me. There's a difference." She sniffled. "You used to be so kind." "I still am," I said. "Just not to people who confuse kindness with weakness." And then I hung up. That was the last time I heard from any of them. I know what they're telling people. That I snapped. That I'm selfish. Cold. That I turned my back on my own blood. Let them. Because I know the truth. I know the long nights. The quiet sacrifices. The times I paid their bills and smiled when they thanked each other instead. The way they laughed at me, then came running when the lights flickered. The years I was the one they leaned on, while pretending I wasn't even in the room. Now, they can figure it out themselves. The storage facilities run like clockwork under new management. The trust is secure, the funds untouched. My niece's future is safe. And for the first time in my adult life, my phone is quiet. Peacefully, blessedly quiet. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. No, I miss who I thought they were, who I hoped they could become. But the version of me that stayed to wait for them, he's gone. The new version? He sleeps better, breathes easier, and smiles, not because he's being polite, but because he's finally free. They'll never know what I took with me when I left that dinner. Because it wasn't just money. It was myself.